So, Naya, there was one announcement slide I skipped. We've dealing with flu and colds this time of year. There are other things going around that I'm sure all of you are well aware of. Not overly anxious about it, but as an abundance of caution. This morning, instead of shaking hands, I would encourage all of us to give a nice sup. So let's practice. Sup, so three. All right, good. So no one will be offended if we're not shaking hands and hugging and all that good stuff. Our scripture reading this morning is Matthew chapter 20, verses 1 through 16. Our POW phrase this week is the 11th hour. That is a phrase that you will hear used in our culture today. There's even a cable news show called the 11th Hour. Have you heard of that before? They actually have misappropriated or misused Scripture. They're trying to say that it happens at 11 p.m., which the show does air at 11 p.m., but that biblical phrase, the 11th hour, does not refer to 11 p.m. So this morning I'm going to read from the English Standard Version, which I believe does a better job of translating the text, but we're going to put the NIV up on the screens so you can kind of see and hear the differences between the two. So pay special attention for the times that are given, especially for that phrase, the 11th hour. You'll see it translated a little differently on the screens. This passage comes right after Jesus has had a conversation with the rich young ruler, who comes up to Jesus and asks, "Hey, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus tells him, you need to follow all of God's commands. And this rich, young, arrogant ruler says, "Yep, no problem. I've done all that. What else you got?" And Jesus says, "Well, there's one more thing. Just sell everything that you own and come and follow me." And we know this story. This rich young man declines to do so, declines to follow Jesus. Well, his disciples overhear this conversation, and Peter goes up to the Lord and asks him, "Listen, we've done this. We have literally followed you. We've left our families. What is in store for us?" And Jesus tells him that the 12 disciples will be on 12 thrones in the new age, that they will be ruling over the 12 tribes of Israel. And yet Jesus tells Peter, the first shall be last, and the last shall be first. And that brings us to chapter 20. "For the kingdom of heaven is like a master of a house who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. After agreeing with the laborers for a denarius a day, he sent them into his vineyard. And going out about the third hour, he saw others standing idle in the marketplace. And to them he said, 'You go into the vineyard too, and whatever is right I will give you.' So they went. Going out again about the 6th hour and the 9th hour, he did the same. And about the 11th hour, he went out and found others standing. And he said to them, 'Why do you stand here idle all day?' They said to him, 'Because no one has hired us.' And so the master of the vineyard said to them, 'You go into the grace garden too.'" Good looking out, Jim. "You go into the vineyard too." And when evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, "Call the laborers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last up to the first." And when those hired about the 11th hour came, each of them received a denarius. Now when those hired first came, they thought they would receive more, but each of them also received a denarius. And on receiving it, they grumbled at the master of the house, saying, "These last worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us who have become the burden, or who have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat." But he replied to one of them, "Friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for a denarius? Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give to this last worker as I give to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or do you begrudge my generosity?" So the last will be first, and the first will be last. Amen. So which group are you in? Which group or category do you fall into? This parable takes place in a marketplace. It's somewhere where food is bought and sold. So I'm wondering, which type of marketplace shopper are you this morning? When you go to the grocery store, which type do you like to go to? There are some in our area that are pretty compact. They're somewhat small. It makes it easy for you to go into the store, find the essentials that you have come for, and then to check out and get out, back out about your business. Do you like to shop at those stores? Maybe you like to shop at those large grocery stores, about a football field in length. And the produce is on one hand, and of course the other essentials, egg and milk, on the complete opposite ends. And so as you make your way from one end of the store to the other, you get to this like halftime show in the middle, where you can buy cups and plates and coffee makers and Keurigs and Yetis or whatever, you name it. And so you got to go on this big journey to get your groceries. Maybe you like to shop at the big box, like wholesale stores, Sam's Club and Costco. There it's even a grander experience, if you will. I mean, you can go there, pick up your food, a recliner if you need one, some lawn care equipment, some patio furniture, and you're all set. You're good to go. But I put myself into the first category. And Nicole will tell you, I will do anything to avoid going to one of those big box wholesale clubs. Because you go there on a Saturday morning, and what do you find? You find idlers. Because you start walking through, checking your big shopping cart, and what do you find at the end caps? Like every other one, someone is set up there with a food sampling station. And so everyone just stops in the middle of the aisle, idle, so they can taste a new recipe for tuna salad. I mean, I leave Costco a worse person than when I walked in. But for those of you who like to idle at Costco, if you come here, I love you too. So which group are you in? There are a bunch of different groups that we get in this parable this morning. The master of the house, God, comes out of the house, it says early in the morning. It would have been about 6 a.m. because that was the start of the workday. So God comes out because he needs some workers to go tend his vineyard. So he comes out at 6 and makes this arrangement, you might call it a covenant, with these people. And he says, I will pay you a denarius for you to go out and work. God basically is saying, I will pay you a full day's wages if you go tend my vineyard. And so they go off and they do. About 9 a.m., what the Greek calls the third hour of the day, God comes out again. And there's another group of people still standing there doing nothing. God tells them, listen, I need you to go work in my vineyard. But instead of saying, I'm going to pay you a full day's wages, what does God say? I'm going to pay you whatever is right. And so this second group goes on into the vineyard. Then you get 2 more. This exchange happens again. God comes out at noon, comes out at 3 p.m., and sends them out. Says he did the exact same thing. I'll pay you whatever is right. You just go work in my vineyard. And then the group that comes out at the 11th hour. Not 11 p.m., but 5 p.m. It's an hour before the workday is done. And God comes up to them and he says, why are you still standing here idle? And they say, because no one's yet hired us. And so the exchange ends this way. God says, go work in my vineyard. He doesn't even tell them what the compensation is going to be. He just says, go work in my vineyard. Now we know how this goes. The foreman, Jesus, calls in everyone who's been working in the vineyard, and he begins to pay. And every single group receives a denarius, a full day's worth of pay, for what they've done, no matter how long they've been in the vineyard. So this story, this account, of offends us. It offends our sensibilities of right and wrong. It offends our sensibilities of fairness and justice. Why in the world should someone be paid for a full day's work when they just started to break into a sweat? You know, we think about deathbed conversions. There are some of us who have been part of the church our whole lives, from an infant and on. You were raised in the church, you went to kids' Sunday school, you went to youth group, you nurtured your faith in college, and now you're teaching it to your kids or grandkids. So what about that person who kind of gets in at the very last second, tires squealing across the finish line? We hear about these deathbed conversions, and it just, that will offend our sensibilities a little bit. Why is it those of us who have been out in the heat all day working for the kingdom, why does someone else get in just the same? So the last shall be first, and the first shall be last. So verse 8, and when evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, call the laborers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last up to the first. Sometimes when you're working hard, you end up at the back of the line, watching God's grace be given out to others. And so there's grumbling. These people who have been faithful in their work out in the field begin to grumble and take exception with God's grace. They begin to judge God's grace. And so, on receiving it, this group of people who've been out there all day, they grumbled at the master of the house, saying, these last. They only worked 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us, who have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat. But the master of the house replied to them, friend, I am doing you no wrong. Sounds like nice, reassuring words, right? Friend, I'm doing you no wrong. But watch how that word friend is used elsewhere in Matthew chapter 22. This is the parable of the wedding feast. A king has set up a wedding banquet, and no one is showing up. And so the king has his servants go out and bring some people in. But when the king came in to look at the guests, he saw there was a man who had no wedding garment, and he said to him, friend, how did you get in here without a wedding garment? And he was speechless. And then this king said to the attendants, bind him hand and foot, and cast him into the outer darkness, in that place where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Friend, I have done you no wrong. Chapter 26. Jesus is praying in the Garden of Gethsemane, and while he was still speaking, who shows up? Judas. And he gives Jesus that kiss that reveals to the others who have come to arrest him who he is. And so Jesus said to Judas, friend, do what you came to do. Friend, this is a cautionary word in chapter 22. God is cautioning us against judging his grace and his mercy and how it is doled out. Because grace, it's not about fairness. It's not about justice. It's about God's generosity. And let's be frank with ourselves. We often like to think, well, we're in that group of people who have been out in the field all day. When in reality, most of us are part of those in the 11th hour who've been called to service. Because see, the thing is, grace will change your entire life. It changes everything. You can't just have a little bit of grace, like I'm just going to get a little bit of grace, and the rest of my life remains touched by sin. Grace overwhelms it all. It changes us. It changes who we are. A couple Saturdays ago, February 22nd, Carolina Hurricanes, it's a hockey team. You know, I'm trying to get up on the hockey. Carolina Hurricanes were playing the Toronto Maple Leafs up in Toronto. And by the way, Leafs is not plural for leaf. It's leaves. But whatever. So the Toronto Maple Leafs were playing the Carolina Hurricanes. And about 6 minutes into the first period, the Carolina Hurricanes hockey player gets injured. He received what was called a lower body injury in the article. That's all it said. So they bring in the backup goalie, and he comes in and he gets injured when he collides with another player in the second period. So now the Hurricanes have lost both of their goalies. So they have to go to this emergency backup goalie. Have you ever heard of this? You know who it is? The Zamboni driver. The Zamboni driver gets pulled in the second period to start tending goal. He's employed by the Toronto Maple Leafs, and yet he has to come in and play for the Carolina Hurricanes. So he comes out from the tunnel or locker room, and he's wearing a Hurricanes jersey, but he's wearing a Maple Leafs helmet. And yet he has to come in and work for the other team. So this guy, Dave Ayers, 42 years old, never played a game of professional hockey in his life. He had done some developmental work in the very minor leagues, but had really not played competitive hockey in quite a long time due to a surgery that he had. And so he takes the first two shots, and they whiz right past him and go into the goal. And yet they go into the locker room between the second and third periods. And one of the Hurricanes players comes up to him and he says, "Just go out there and have fun." So this Zamboni driver goes out and begins to tend goal again, and he blocks all 8 remaining shots that are put on goal, and he preserves the win. Can you believe that? All of these other players he's working with have been at it for so long. They've done hockey clinics. They've been in the minor leagues. They played in college. They've been working so hard to be a professional hockey player. And this Zamboni driver gets in at the 11th hour and will forever be known as a professional hockey player. The 11th hour is pointing us to the coming judgment. So I want to challenge your thinking for just a minute this morning. What if we as a church, what if we as a community prayed for the last person who will receive God's grace? Did you ever think about that? There will come a time, Judgment Day, when the ways of this world are no more. And Christ, we say it every Communion Sunday, will come again to judge the living and the dead. So who is that last person out there who will receive God's grace? And what are we doing to get to them? Go work in my vineyard, God says. How would it change your approach to your family, to your coworkers, to strangers, if you knew there were 60 minutes left on the clock? How would that change how you witness to others about the grace that we have received? Go work in my vineyard. It's not about best and worst. You know, Jesus talks about first and last, but he says this whole thing is going to get upended. So maybe it's not even about first and last either. It's about serving the kingdom, serving God, or being idle. So don't just stand in the aisle. Don't just stand in the aisle munching on those samples, but take your shopping cart that is filled with the gifts God has given you and go into his vineyard. Amen. Well, gracious God, sometimes we wonder what our purpose is, why you created us in this age, at this time, why you've put us in this place. But we are reminded that there is a reason we're here, and that's to serve the King. So God, I pray that whether we are sitting in the front row this morning or the last, that we will serve the King. Lord, that you will take any idleness that is in us and remove it. That we won't just sit still and watch life pass us by, but we will get up, get moving, and go into your vineyard.